Okay, this is a bonus video on how to use Excel's VLOOKUP function. This is not covered in the book. This will not be graded. There is no assignment associated with VLOOKUP at all. This is just a bonus video because I believe that VLOOKUP is probably one of the most misunderstood functions and in Excel, but it's also probably one of the most needed and most used functions that I've seen in my experience. So I'm just going to put together this quick tutorial video explaining what a VLOOKUP is, and I'm going to post it for your reference, and I suggest that you watch it and try to understand what VLOOKUPs are for, and you may find them very useful in the future. So what is a VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP is an Excel function, which is a predefined formula that comes prepackaged in Excel as part of the formulas included in that application. VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. And what does that mean? What that means is that you can actually, I've got a definition of it here, so we'll read the definition and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. VLOOKUP is a function that means vertical lookup, and you can use it to search for a value in the first column of a table array and returns a value in the same row from another column in that table array. Okay, so that definition might not have helped much, but essentially what it does, or the application that it's used for, is a lot of time it's used to compare data or to pull data from one spreadsheet into another, which is the application that I'm going to use here. So what I've got is a completely hypothetical list of, or I guess fictitious is a better word, fictitious list of students, and what I need to do is pull all of their grades into this grade sheet. So I've got a list to the left that contains, let's see how many students that is. That looks like 8 students. 8 students, and I need to pull their grades into this spreadsheet that I use to track grades. So now the grades for the test are obtained automatically through a system that grades the tests. So that information is sent to me in a spreadsheet form, but it doesn't have all the same information that my grade list or my grade sheet has. In this case, this is all hypothetical scenario. So what I've done is I've taken that information that I was sent from the system that graded the test, and I've put it in the spreadsheet on the second tab, sheet 2. And you can see I've got the student ID, the letter grade, test 1 average, test 2 letter grade, and test 2 average. So what I want to do is take this information and add it to my grade sheet, which I've got on sheet 1 of this spreadsheet. Now you may say, well, why don't you just copy and paste it? Well, if you copy and paste, you always run the risk of mismatching data. For example, this list of students isn't in any particular order. If you notice, the student IDs are not in any particular order. The names are not alphabetized or anything like that. The sheet over here has the student IDs listed in numerical order. So I can't just copy and paste this data from here to here in sheet 1 because it wouldn't match. Now, another way would be to sort by student ID on this page. I could do that and copy and paste, but the point of this exercise is to learn how to use a VLOOKUP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a VLOOKUP to pull this information from one spreadsheet to the other. And it's really easy once you learn how to use it. VLOOKUP requires 4 arguments, basically 4 inputs. And then when I start typing the VLOOKUP function, you can see when I type in my open parentheses, Excel gives me this screen tip that shows me the arguments required. They're lookup value, table array, column index number, and then range lookup that's in the brackets. We'll talk a little bit more about when I get to that. So the first thing I want to know, or first thing I need, is my lookup value. So as I mentioned a minute ago, I'm going to use this use the student ID as my VLOOKUP value. So I click the student ID cell, and it's going to populate that cell reference into my VLOOKUP formula, and I'm going to type a comma. Now it's moved on. You can see that the screen tip has now moved from lookup value to table array. You see how it's bold for the argument it's pending. I said just a minute ago lookup value was bold. Now table array is bold. Okay, so table array. So now it wants to know where do I want to look this value up. That's what table array is. It's just the range of data that you're looking up, that you're looking for your value in. All right, so that data, that table array is on sheet 2. Okay, so I'm using this data range, or this table array, as VLOOKUP calls it, or as Excel calls it. So now I've got my table highlighted. Type another comma, and I want, let's see, we want the test 1 letter grade. So that's in column B, right? And you can see it's asking me, the third argument VLOOKUP needs is the column index number. Now what that means is, okay, I'm wanting to look up a particular value in this table array. Alright, so I've got the value, I know the table array that I'm looking it up in, but what do you want to look up? What is the information that you're wanting to return for this function? Well, in this case, we're wanting test 1 letter grade. Alright, so that's in column 2, 1, 2 of the table array. So the next thing I do is I type a 2, comma, and you can see the last argument, range lookup, gives me 2 options. It gives me a true and a false. True is an approximate match, which means that I'm not 100% sure that the value that I'm looking for is in my table, or if it's not, I want the one closest to it. That's what an approximate match means. In this case, we know that our student ID numbers are in both tables, so there should be no reason for an approximate match. We should be able to use the exact match. So you can type out false, or you can press 0 for false, and if you were to use the true argument, it would be 1. So in Excel, 0 equals false and 1 equals true. Alright, close my parentheses and hit enter. Okay, so now you can see for George, he made an A on test 1. That was his letter grade on test 1. So let's just double check ourselves. We're going to take that value, the student ID that we used as a VLOOKUP, and we're going to find it in this table. Okay, it finds it on the bottom row, and sure enough, test 1 letter grade right there is A. Okay, so our VLOOKUP worked. Now, I need to find the exact same information for these students here. So how do I do that? Well, by now you should have learned that Excel has autofill feature, which once you click the cell, if you want to autofill the cells either below or to the right of wherever your function resides, you can click the autofill handle, which is on the bottom right corner of the cell. Looks like a little square. But the trick is to put your cursor over that bottom right corner, get the black cross, and then click, hold it down, and drag all the way down. Alright, now you can see Excel has populated the other students' letter grades on the first test. And if you notice, the formula changes. See, for George, we needed to look up the value in B2, which was his student ID. We wanted to find that value in this table, which we did on the 9th row, and then we wanted to return the value that's in column 2 of that table, which is letter grade. Okay, so that's what we did. That's what VLOOKUP does. And then the last value 0, we told Excel we want an exact match of this student ID. We don't need an approximate match. We don't need one that looks kind of close. We want George's student ID, because this is, in this case, we know that the data should match between the 2 tables, so there's no reason for an approximate match. We want an exact match. Okay, So we got the first column populated. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull over the test average, the actual numerical value that they made on the test. So we're going to do the same thing. VLOOKUP. Alright, I've got VLOOKUP entered. I've got my open parentheses. It's telling me, okay, what arguments do you want? Alright, again, I'm going to use student ID. Type comma. Now where's my table array? In this case, it's on sheet 2, and it's this range of cells. Alright, so I've got my table highlighted, comma, and this time I want the value that's in the third column. Okay, so 1, 2, third column, I want that value. So I want VLOOKUP to return the value in the third column. So I type in a 3, comma, and then we talked about the true and false, or the approximate and exact match. I always use an exact match unless I have some real reason not to. So that last argument should almost always be 0 unless you're just really in a situation where the value that you're trying to look up, you need an approximation and not an exact match. Okay, enter. Alright, so George's test average was 96 on the first test. Okay, so is that correct? I'm going to take that student ID, I'm going to find it in this table just to check myself. It's on the bottom row, and sure enough, test 1 letter grade is A. Or excuse me, or the test 1 average is 96. So that's what we're trying to accomplish in the second, or in this column of our grade sheet. Alright, so same thing. We're going to double click, and now we've got all of our values. Okay, so we're going to do it again for the test 2 letter grade. We'll do a VLOOKUP. The value that I'm going to use as my key or as my lookup value is the student ID again, because that's and the reason why I'm using the student ID is because that's the only common information between the two tables. So let's hit escape, and I want to cover that real quick. So the student ID, you see in this table I've got student name, student ID, class number. Okay, well the class number is the same. All right. The student names are not included in my test results that I was sent. The only thing I've got to go on is my student ID. So that's why we're keying on the student ID, because that's our lookup value. That's our common thread between the two tables. Okay, so back to my VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, open parentheses, what value do I want to look for in my table? I want to look for the student ID. Okay, well now where do I want to look for that student ID at? I want to look for it in this table of data. Alright, now this time I'm looking for test 2 letter grade. Alright, so in this case it is now 1, 2, 3 in the 4th column. Alright, so I'm going to type a comma to input my table array. I'm going to type a 4 to tell them to return me the value that's in the 4th column of the table, and then a 0 for an exact match, and enter. So this time we're saying George also made an A, test 2 letter grade. And let's see if we're right. And we're right. Okay. So VLOOKUP works great so far. So we're going to double click that autofill handle and populate the rest of my cell range. Now, last column, we're looking for the test 2 average. So what's the numerical test average for this, or really should be test score. It would probably be a better way to describe it. So VLOOKUP. Remember, we're using the student ID because it's the common thread between both tables of data. Alright, so I want to look up B2 in this range of data. And in this case, we want 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column. Comma, 0, close parentheses. Okay, now 91 is George's average. We'll double click and autofill, and we're done. Okay, so that's how you use a VLOOKUP. Now, a couple of tricks and a couple of I'll say potential pitfalls you may run into. So we're going to redo this last column one more time. I want to show you one trick. VLOOKUP. Most of the time, the spreadsheets that you'll probably be using are going to have a lot more data than this simple spreadsheet that I've got here. Alright, so in this case, we're going to use VLOOKUP to find this student ID in this range of data. Now, I want you to watch when I click and drag my range of data. Okay, you see right there, right here, the 5C that is the little screen tip just to the right of my black arrow. What that's telling you, as you click across, you see I went back 1, it reduced to 4, I went back 1, it reduced to 3. What that's doing is that is telling you how many columns you've highlighted. Alright, so my screen tip's back over here on the left now, but what that's saying is that you've highlighted 5 columns. So Excel is trying to give you some information to help you work your function. So in this case, if the value that you wanted to return was in the last column of your table array, like in this case it is, you know automatically, because Excel tells you what column index you need to input. It's 5. And the reason why I point that out is because when you get into spreadsheets that have hundreds of columns and hundreds of rows, or even thousands of columns and thousands of rows, and you do a VLOOKUP against it, you may be using a lookup value that is in the first row, but your value that you want return may be way out here, several hundred rows, or excuse me, several hundred columns to the right. So when you click and drag, before you let off of your left mouse button, look for that screen tip, and it'll tell you exactly how many columns that you've highlighted, and that more than likely is going to tell you the number you need to input, assuming that the value that you're looking up is in the last row. More times than not, it is. So that's just one screen tip, or one tip on a VLOOKUP. Another thing is when your VLOOKUP doesn't work. Alright, most of the time you're going to get some situations where you type in a VLOOKUP and you're going to get some kind of error. This happens all the time. Happens to people that I work with a lot. They'll ask me from time to time about it, and I'll just go back and look at their formula, and I'll say, well, you forgot to do this. Okay, so in this case, let's just play devil's advocate. Let's say I want to look up this value one more time. I click my student ID number, all right, because that's the value I want to look up. And normally I should hit a comma, but I should type a comma to secure that first argument into my formula. Well, let's just say that I forget to do that, and I click and I go and highlight my range. All right, and then I type a comma, and I want the value in the 5th column. I type my 0 like I normally would, and I close my parentheses and I hit enter. Well, you get this value error. Well, what in the world does that mean? Value, # value, exclamation point. What does value mean? And you'll notice that you'll get this screen tip here, this little menu that tries to help you solve your errors. It says a value used in the formula is of the wrong data type. Well, maybe. Okay. If you click the down arrow, it says error in value, help on this error, show calculation steps, ignore error, edit in formula bar, error checking options. So it gives you a lot of options, but really the first thing I would recommend doing is going back and looking at my formula or my function and make sure that I've got all my inputs right. Okay, so I look at the formula bar, and I see right off that I've got one argument, which is the table array. It's columns A through E on sheet 2. I want to return the value out of column 5 in that sheet, and then I want an exact match. But where is my first argument? Remember, I'm supposed to have 4 arguments. And if I click in the formula bar, see, it shows me I should have a lookup value, which is what's missing in this case, a table array, a column index number, and then the range lookup, or the true or false, exact match, approximate match value. So in this case, what happened is I forgot to input my first value, or my first argument, which really, I clicked the cell a while ago, but what happened is I didn't type my comma to keep that information in the formula. I clicked something else. So The point is every time you click a cell or click a range of cells or type something into this formula to tell Excel that that's your entry or that is the value that you want to input, you have to type a comma. So then it knows that, okay, Brian wants to use cell B2, so he typed a comma. Now we're going to move on to the next argument, which you can see it has because it's got table array input. Well, the rest of my information in my formula is correct, so if I just hit enter, okay, now my formula works, right? Okay, so that's one very easy pitfall I see a lot of people make mistakes on. All right, let's do another example of a common error. And the reason why I cover these is because it happens quite a lot. When people are new to using VLOOKUP, they get all kind of weird errors because they're not used to using it. Sometimes the concept of a VLOOKUP is difficult for them to grasp, so until they do it a few times, they may run into some weird problems. So this time, I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. I'm going to type it. I'm going to click my lookup value, and I've got that in B2. Then I hit comma to enter it into the formula. And then I'm going to purposely enter the wrong range. So I'm going to, instead of starting at column A, I'm going to start at B, and I'm going to highlight C, D, and E. I'm going to type in my number 5 because I want the 5th column, and the number 0 because I want an exact match. Okay, now I get this not applicable error. Now what this means, and you'll get the same menu, value not available error, which is that means the value that I'm looking for, this value was not, Excel or VLOOKUP did not find this value in the range that I specified. That's what that means. It means that 8907 is nowhere to be found in the range in columns B through E on sheet 2. So if I look at columns B through E on sheet 2, well, there is not an 8907 anywhere in here. Okay? And you think, well, yeah, that's right because it's in this column. Well, that's right, it is in that column, but is that what I told my VLOOKUP function to look at? No. I told it to look in columns B through E, and since this value is not found in columns B through E in my data table, it just comes back and tells me, okay, I looked for it and it's not there. Now, this can be something that is a useful tool, or it could be just an error. In this case, it's an error. So let me correct the error to show you that since our range of cells really should be A through E, columns A through E, I'm going to type that in here. I'm going to change the B so that my range is columns A through E, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so now I get my correct value. Now, a minute ago, I mentioned that it could be a good thing. That the non-applicable error could be a good thing, or you could be useful, I guess is probably a better way to put it. So let's just say I add a new student. We'll call him Reggie. All right, Reggie's got a student number of 1472. He's in CIS 146. He hasn't taken any tests yet because he's a new student. We're going to let him catch up. He's a late enrollee. Okay, so in this case, when I type my VLOOKUP or copy it down, I'll get correct values for everybody except for Reggie. Well, I know my formula works because I got values for everybody else. Why didn't I get a value for Reggie? Well, let me go look at the data table. Now, when I look for Reggie's student ID, it's not there. And that's because his student ID does not exist. So, and the reason why I point this out is this can be useful when you're trying to look to see if some data or something is, whether it's included in a list, in another list of data or not. So for example, if I wanted to find out if I had anyone that did not take the test or did not or if whether their tests were graded or not, I can use this scenario, because all these students, they took the test and I've got a grade for them. Well, Reggie didn't. He missed the test and I don't have a grade for him, so that would alert me. So I need to go check out and see what's going on with Reggie's test score. So that's that's how you use a VLOOKUP. Those are a couple of the errors that you'll see. That is by no means all of the errors that you'll see. There's some other errors that come up. Some of them have to do with the way your values are formatted, like your lookup value mostly. And there are some other values that some other errors that you'll see, but this is just a beginner type of tutorial on how to use a VLOOKUP. I recommend that you try it. I recommend that you use it, and if you view this video and you've got any questions, let me know. Thanks.